Hi, Kevin Vaughn from the 9 News Investigates team here with my colleague Chris Bianchi, a meteorologist on the 9 News Weather Impact team. Chris, we've worked together now at 9 News for about 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah, almost 5 years. So
Yes.
crazy.
Yes. And the crazy thing, even crazier than that 5 years, is that we discovered this week that we crossed paths a long time ago in another city, and neither of us made the connection once we got to Channel 9. This was all the way back in October 2007. I was a reporter at the late, great Rocky Mountain News newspaper here in Denver. Chris, in October 2007, where were you? What were you doing in your life?
I was a junior at Boston University. I was a college student, a 19-year-old college kid, hanging out there. Lifelong Colorado sports fan, and that plays into how we crossed paths a few years ago.
Yeah, so you were a lifetime Colorado sports fan, but I know you a bit, and you didn't grow up in Colorado, did you?
No, I grew up in Connecticut, but my parents, long story short, is they immigrated to Colorado, got married in Colorado, and then moved to the New York area where I ultimately grew up. I grew up about an hour outside of New York City in southern Connecticut, and went to school on the East Coast as well. But I always had this huge love for Colorado sports. I was a Bronco fan, Avalanche fan, Nuggets fan for the longest time, and also a Rockies fan as well, Kevin.
Was anything going on with the Rockies in October 2007?
Yeah, some of you might be going, oh yeah, October 07, Rocktober. And I was, back then, I paid, I think my college years is a lot of money. It was like $20 a month to pay for MLB TV so I could watch all the games from my dorm room. And I watched probably 120, 130 of the Rockies' 162 games that year in the regular season. Of course, the Rockies went on that crazy run, made it to their first ever World Series. Still to this day, their only World Series trip. And I was there for games 1 and 2 at Fenway Park.
Now, you were there for games 1 and 2. So how'd you get tickets?
So one of the local tricks in Boston is, I don't know if they still do this, but back then you could sleep outside and they had a handful of day of tickets for return tickets from season ticket holders, even some standing room only tickets. And so basically it's first come, first serve. So I slept outside to make sure that I was able to get some of those tickets, and that's how I was able to get them.
So segueing into my part of this story, I was a city-side reporter, but I did a lot of sports adjacent stuff. I did some really serious sports investigative work, but I also did some fan features and things going on around big games. And so you'll remember in 2007, the Rockies won 13 of their last 14 games to get themselves into a position to possibly get into the playoffs. And the San Diego Padres lost on the last day of the season, which set up this tiebreaker game between them at Coors Field. So I got a call from one of my editors the day before that says, hey, you want to work a late shift tomorrow? Go to the game and do a feature about fans at the game. And I said, sure, this sounds like fun. So I spent the night in the rock pile. It was this back and forth game. The lead switched. The Padres tied it up in the 8th, went into the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th. And it ended when Matt Holliday slid into home and they were awarded the winning run. Still a controversial call. During that game, the city editor called me and said, if they win this game tonight, you're going tomorrow wherever they go, which was Philadelphia, and you're going to be with them until this ends. So I went to Philadelphia and I went to Phoenix. And a couple days before the World Series, I found myself in Boston looking for Rockies fans in this sea of Red Sox jerseys, caps, jackets, everything you can imagine. And on Lansdowne Street, which is like runs along behind the Green Monster at Fenway Park, I find these 3 crazy college students who are sleeping on the sidewalk for 2 days and hanging out and apparently skipping school, it sounds like, to try to get some of these last minute tickets. And who do I run into then but Chris Bianchi?
And it's crazy. So exactly right. So I really was like, this wasn't just for a show to be a Rockies fan. I have been a diehard Rockies. In fact, Kevin, you'll appreciate this. I was wearing a Juan Pierre jersey going in there that was actually autographed by Juan Pierre. And because I grew up in the New York area, he autographed it. He saw Juan Pierre, former Rocky center fielder, back in the early 2000s, like 2001. And he saw me at the old Shea Stadium in New York where the Mets used to play, and he signed it for me, and that's what I wore into Game 1. But like you said, I was there sleeping. I got actually caught by one of my professors because they posted me on the TV, and they were like, "Oh, that's why Chris isn't in class." I said, "Yeah, sorry about that."
So I talked to Chris and two of his friends 2 days before the game, and then I went back the day before the game, and I actually went with you guys up to the ticket window, and I recorded you guys buying the tickets and walked into the stadium with you. I interviewed you after the game, after that sad, hard 13-1 loss.
Oh, they got pummeled.
And you said then that you would never regret the sacrifice you made to get these tickets. Has it 18 years later? Do you regret it at all?
No, I'm still. Hey, you know what? I'll say forever that I was at the Rockies' first ever World Series game. No matter what happens with the Rockies, the organization, I'll always have that claim to fame. And I think it reflects. I really have been a lifelong diehard Rockies fan, and living out here, that hasn't changed things either for that, Kevin. So.
Yeah. So here is Chris Bianchi on the pages of the Rocky Mountain News, holding his homemade sign, "Holiday lifts weights, Poppy lifts cakes." If this meteorologist thing doesn't work out, I think you've definitely got a future as a sign maker. But even though it was 13-1, how much fun was this?
It was fun. The first inning was great. The Rockies were still in it. They got pummeled though. But no, it was so fun. Honestly, the experience. I was with a lot of my college friends. I wasn't alone, as you mentioned. I was with two other Rockies fans, but there was also a crew of my college friends, 10, 15 of us. So, it'd be like tailgating for, I don't know, a big game tickets with a bunch of your college buddies. I know that takes place at big schools all across the country, SEC schools, maybe even at CU for some really big games. So it was a blast. It was totally worth it. I still remember that. I hate to say it for my professors, whatever I would have learned in class probably got one-upped by the experience I had.
Sometimes life lessons are the most important lessons we can learn, right?
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is I interviewed you after that game, and the last thing I had in my story was that you were headed back out to that cold, damp concrete sidewalk on Lansdowne Street to try to get tickets to Game 2. So tell me, did you get tickets to Game 2?
I got tickets to Game 2. That was a one-run game, so it was a lot better. I think Ubaldo Jimenez pitched that one. Jeff Francis Game 1, he got rocked in Game 1, but then Jimenez pitched pretty well Game 2. I was there, sitting. I got standing room tickets, so I was actually ended up being about like 30 rows behind home plate, standing up. Game 1, I got sit-down tickets in right field, so I was in right field for Game 1 out there in Fenway Park. Fenway Park, if you're unfamiliar, it's a small park. It's under 40,000, so getting in is a big deal, and it's one of those parks where there's really no bad seat because it's so small and compressed, but it was really cool. I got into Games 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's
pretty
awesome.
Pretty lucky.
That's awesome. So I was having dinner the other night with a friend, and we were talking about Rocktober, and he was asking me about some of my stories and said he'd like to see them. I pulled out this paper, and I started looking through it, and I remembered this story vividly, but I don't remember the names of any of the people I interviewed for it. And that was when I was like, Chris Bianchi? Is this our Chris Bianchi? And it was.
That's crazy.
How crazy is that?
What a small world. It's so fun. And I've actually said in the newsroom a few times I was at those games. It was in passing. And, I'm sure most people didn't really retain it. But then for you, it's like, I interviewed you. Fun fact, too, you mentioned you were looking for Rockies fans. You could tell me firsthand. There were not many Rockies fans in that game.
No. And there were not many in Philadelphia either.
Really, not in Philly either.
There were more in
Phoenix. Yeah.
But yeah, in fact, I think the day that I talked to you guys the first time, you guys were among the only a handful of people that I found that weren't wearing Red Sox gear around the ballpark.
There might have been within the 39,000 people at Fenway that night. There might have been 100 to 200 Rockies fans, and one of them, I think you talked to as well, was Brad Hopp's mom. I spoke with her too, one of the Rockies players' moms, because I remember she had a distinct purple scarf. And, every time you saw a Rockies fan in that stadium, it was just like, oh, yeah, it was a big deal. It's like, wow, We were getting yelled at. We were getting
Yeah.
stuff thrown at us and stuff is to be
Yeah.
expected. But anyways, it was really fun.
It was great fun. And it's been great fun talking to you about this and knowing that we have this shared experience from these years ago that we didn't even really make the connection on until just this week.
Exactly. It's so fun. But I appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, man.
Thanks.